The stars were dying, not one by one as they always had, but in solemn, catastrophic silence, like candles extinguished by the hand of some unseen mourner. Across the void of the galaxy, planets shivered beneath the waning light of their suns, and ancient empires, once towering and proud, crumbled into dust and whispers. In the deepest reaches, where the warp whispered in tongues older than time itself, a shadow moved, not a being, not quite, but an awareness that spanned light years, waiting, watching, and remembering. It was in this shadow, this delicate tremor between life and nothingness, that the tale of the Sisters of Silence began. We truly love and care for you. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, let's get started. In the heart of a dying system, a single world clung stubbornly to existence. Its cities, once glittering monoliths of techno-arcane wonder, now lay fractured, their towers fractured and blackened from centuries of war. The air was thick with ash, and the faint electric hum of decaying energy fields. Amid the ruins walked a figure clad in obsidian and silver, a woman whose presence was a contradiction. She was both seen and unseen, a sentinel of silence in a world that had long forgotten the sound of peace. Her name, though rarely spoken aloud, carried weight heavier than the gravitas of any planet. Seraphine Kale, the youngest yet most resolute of the Sisters of Silence. She paused on a ridge overlooking the shattered metropolis. The wind, acrid with chemical decay, swept through her robes, revealing glimpses of the sigils etched into her armor, symbols of loyalty, judgment, and a commitment that transcended mortality. She had walked for centuries, though her face betrayed none of the passage of time. The warp had granted her existence beyond the span of ordinary humans, but not without cost. Every year she endured, every battle she witnessed, stripped away a fragment of her humanity, leaving a vessel of purpose, of duty, and of silence. Seraphine's gaze drifted to the horizon where the last of the system's twin suns bled a red light across the sky. It reminded her of the fragility of life, of empires that rose only to fall into shadows. And yet, in that crimson glow, she found the echo of possibility, the faint heartbeat of worlds that might yet endure if the sisters' vigilance remained unwavering. Her thoughts, however, were interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, a creature of no more than 2 meters, draped in the remnants of ceremonial robes, carrying the aura of dread that only one sent by the higher echelons of the Imperium could summon. The messenger knelt, voice hoarse from travel, and presented a data slate encoded with the seal of the silent conclave. Seraphine Kyle, it rasped. The Council summons you. The breaches in the sectors of Orpheon are worsening. Your presence is required to evaluate the threat. Seraphine took the slate, her fingers brushing the cold metal, as if to ground herself in the tangible world. She had known this day would come. She had seen the signs in the decayed stars, in the tremors of the warp, and in the whispers of her own kind. Betrayal had begun its slow creep across the Empire, not from the Xenos who lurked in the void, nor from rebels daring to raise banners in shattered cities, but from within. The hands meant to guide, to protect, were fraying, and the sisterhood would soon be forced to confront truths they were never meant to hear. She rose, moving toward the remnants of her transport skimmer. The ground beneath her boots cracked, sending tiny showers of rubble into the still air. Each step was deliberate, measured, as if by pacing herself she could stave off the inevitability she sensed closing in around her. In the distance, the skeletal outlines of the Imperial spire pierced the sky like a shard of memory from a brighter age. It was to this place, emblem of lost glory, that she would travel to face both the conclave and the questions that gnawed at her mind. How far could one go in service to duty before it consumes the self? The transport's engines hummed to life, a deep, resonant sound that echoed against the broken cityscape. Seraphine seated herself, the straps of her harness securing her as the skimmer lifted from the rubble-strewn surface. As the city fell away beneath her, a shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of anticipation. The conclave rarely summoned a sister without cause, and if they had called her, the matter was grave indeed. Memories, as relentless as the stars themselves, stirred within her. Faces of comrades lost, whispers of betrayal half forgotten, and the silent witness of centuries of bloodshed and sacrifice filled her mind. Each memory was a reminder of the cost of her path. Immortality was a gift, yes, but a cursed one. To endure beyond the fleeting lives of those she swore to protect meant to carry the weight of history, to observe the decay and rebirth of humanity without respite. And now that burden would be tested anew. As the skimmer traversed the final stretches toward the spire, Seraphine allowed herself a fleeting glance at the stars beyond the atmosphere. In the deep black, she saw the faintest flicker of a distant nova, a dying star whose final light was a warning and a promise in equal measure. The galaxy was vast, indifferent, and cruel, but in its immensity there were threads of hope, fragile and easily broken, that the Sisters of Silence had vowed to safeguard. The transport landed with a muted hiss at the base of the spire, and Seraphine stepped into the silence that had always been her companion. Inside, the corridors were lined with the cold, metallic sheen of centuries-old machinery. The architecture spoke of order, precision, and the relentless discipline of the sisterhood. Yet even in these walls, she sensed fissures, shadows of doubt, traces of unseen plots that stretched far beyond the vision of any single sister. She moved with practiced grace, the quiet of her footsteps a counterpoint to the storm of thoughts within her mind. The council awaited in the Hall of Echoes, a chamber whose very design emphasized the authority and omniscience of the silent conclave. As she entered, the figures seated in their ceremonial armor turned to regard her, their presence both reassuring and formidable. Among them, she glimpsed the tension hidden behind ritual masks, loyalty tested, ambition restrained, and fear disguised as vigilance. Seraphine Kyle, intoned the highest voice in the hall, resonant and commanding, yet edged with unease. You are aware of the crisis in Orpheon. What is your counsel? She paused, letting the weight of her centuries of experience settle over her words. The breaches are not mere accidents of war, she said, voice steady though her thoughts churned. There is intention. Something or someone manipulates the threads of our security. We are on the brink, and if we fail, the cost will be immeasurable. The conclave exchanged glances, the silence in the room almost suffocating. Seraphine understood then that her journey had truly begun. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether she and the Sisters of Silence would prevail, or whether the shadows of betrayal would finally claim them all. Outside, the stars continued their slow, mournful death, and within the heart of the spire, Seraphine Kyle felt the first stirrings of a war that would test the boundaries of loyalty, morality, and the very essence of what it meant to endure beyond the span of mortals. The galaxy waited, and she would answer. The Hall of Echoes still hummed with residual energy from the conclave's deliberations when Seraphine Kale stepped into the corridors that led to the observation deck. The chamber behind her, though imposing and austere, felt constrictive now. a cage of ritual and expectation that neither time nor tradition could soften. Outside, the dying stars of the Orphean system cast faint, uneven light across the spires of the city, their glow a reminder of worlds teetering on the edge of collapse. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts gather like storm clouds before the first strike of lightning. Her mind returned to the data slate delivered by the messenger earlier. The breaches were not merely tactical anomalies. They were deliberate, insidious, a series of fractures within the defenses of the Imperium that could not be repaired with brute force alone. Someone, or something, was undermining centuries of order. Seraphine could feel it in her bones, a disquiet that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the unbearable weight of responsibility. The observation deck opened before her, a vast platform suspended above the city, like a crown of steel and glass. The panorama was both beautiful and horrific. Ruined streets stretched for kilometers, towers split and twisted, as though the very laws of physics had been bent in malice. Far beyond, the dying suns draped the horizon in a palette of crimson and violet, colors that seemed to bleed sorrow into the void. She allowed herself a moment to simply look, to absorb the enormity of what hung in the balance. Immortality, she reflected, was not merely a gift, it was an obligation. To endure was to witness, to act was to bear the consequences. You have grown contemplative, Seraphine. The voice came from the shadows, soft yet deliberate, carrying the weight of authority and intimacy in equal measure. She turned to see Sister Althara, one of the senior members of the silent conclave, her visage hidden behind the silver mask that denoted both rank and commitment. Her posture was unassuming, but there was a tension beneath it, a barely contained storm that had been tempered by centuries of discipline. I think it is only natural to consider the implications of what we face, Seraphine replied. Her tone was calm, but inside, a turbulence roiled. She had known Althara for decades, perhaps even longer in perception, and yet the presence of her senior sister always reminded her of the fragile line between guidance and command. Althara stepped closer, and for a fleeting moment, the wind from the open observation deck tousled the edges of her robes. Implications are unavoidable, she said softly, but contemplation without action is a luxury we cannot afford. The Orphean breaches, they are not the only ones. Across the sectors, other systems report irregularities, communications disrupted, patrols vanishing, loyal forces turning against one another without clear cause. The enemy is patient. Seraphine absorbed the words with quiet intensity. Patience was a trait she understood well. Immortality demanded it. But patience could also be an instrument of fear, a slow erosion of trust. Every system lost, every betrayal uncovered, was a scar on the conscience. And she knew, in some deep, unspoken part of herself, that the scars of the sisters would soon define the very future of the Imperium. Then we are to assume this is an internal matter, she asked, voice steady, betraying none of the unease that churned beneath her measured words. Althara's masked face tilted slightly, a gesture that was almost imperceptible. Perhaps, but it is not that simple. The enemy hides within shadows, both known and unknown. We cannot discern all motives, nor can we trust all intentions. Even our own ranks may harbour seeds of corruption. The sisters have long been the guardians of silence, the instruments of judgment and truth. But even we are not immune to the sway of ambition. Ambition. The word echoed like a bell tolling in her mind. She had seen it, felt it, understood its silent power. It was the force that toppled empires, that seduced the loyal into treachery. and now it had crept into the very order she had sworn to uphold. Seraphine turned away from the observation deck, moving toward the inner corridors that led to the Conclave's intelligence archives. "Then we must act," she said, more to herself than to Althara. "We must trace the breaches, identify the source, and restore order. Every delay, every hesitation brings us closer to irreparable loss." Althara followed, silent, her presence a reminder of the weight of authority that pressed upon every sister of silence. "Do not forget," she said finally, voice soft yet cutting, "that every action has a consequence. In seeking to preserve the Imperium, you may be forced to forsake what you hold dear. The lines between loyalty and betrayal blur when the stakes are infinite." Seraphine's mind drifted to the memories that haunted her. Friends lost to the whims of war, allies who had vanished into treachery, and the quiet moments where she had questioned whether the cause was worth the cost. Loyalty was a fragile construct, often more a matter of perception than reality. And yet, she had sworn her life, her immortality, to uphold it. The intelligence archives were vast, a labyrinth of data spheres, historical records, and encrypted transmissions. Seraphine moved among them with a practiced hand, her eyes scanning for anomalies, for patterns that might reveal the hidden hand behind the Orphean crisis. Time, which for mortals was measured in years, was for her a flowing river, its currents both friend and adversary. She worked with the patience of centuries, knowing that a single oversight could tip the balance of entire systems. Hours passed, though for her it was no more than minutes. Patterns emerged slowly, threads weaving together the story of corruption and intent. Communications had been intercepted and altered, patrols misdirected or destroyed. Whispers of a faction within the Imperium that sought to exploit the chaos began to surface. The signs were subtle but unmistakable. Someone was orchestrating a fracture within the very core of their order. A flicker of movement caught her eye. A junior sister, one she had trained herself, hesitated at the threshold of the archive chamber. Her face, unmasked and youthful, betrayed uncertainty, perhaps fear. "Seraphine," she whispered, voice trembling. "The breaches, they're worse than we thought. The influence, it reaches further than Orpheon. Some say even the outer sectors have begun to question their allegiance. Is it true?" Seraphine approached, placing a steadying hand on the girl's shoulder. The touch was both reassurance and command. "Truth is not a simple thing, and loyalty is a fragile shield," she said quietly. "What we know is that we must act even when the path is unclear. Courage is measured not in certainty, but in the willingness to stand against the unknown." The young sister nodded, eyes wide but resolute. Together, they pored over the records, connecting threads that spanned sectors, systems, and centuries. Every revelation was a weight added to Seraphine's shoulders, yet each discovery strengthened her resolve. If the Imperium was to survive, if the Sisters of Silence were to maintain their sacred charge, then sacrifices would be demanded. Lives, trust, and perhaps even fragments of her own humanity. Outside, the dying suns of Orpheon continued their slow descent toward darkness, painting the remnants of civilization in stark relief. Within the archives, a different light flickered across Seraphine's features. The light of determination, of awareness, and of the dawning understanding that the trials ahead would test not only the loyalty of the Imperium, but the very essence of what it meant to endure. And in the silence that followed, the unspoken truth settled over her like a shroud. In the coming days, decisions would be made that could not be undone, alliances tested in fire, and betrayals revealed that would change the course of the galaxy forever. The corridors of the spire were colder than usual that morning, though the mechanical climate control hummed with the same predictable monotony it had for centuries. Seraphine Kyle moved through them with the quiet precision of someone who had long since made peace with solitude. Her footsteps echoed faintly against the polished metal, a rhythmic counterpoint to the thoughts that churned like storm clouds in her mind. The breaches in Orpheon were no longer isolated incidents. They were spreading, insidious, a contagion of doubt and betrayal, infecting systems once thought loyal. She paused at a junction where the light shifted, casting elongated shadows across the walls. Even in the spire's immaculate architecture, she could see imperfections, tiny fractures in panels, minor misalignments, subtle distortions that had likely gone unnoticed by all but the most vigilant observer. Each imperfection was a whisper of entropy, a reminder that even the Imperium's most formidable structures were not immune to decay. "You are restless," came a voice from the shadows. Seraphine turned to see Sister Valeria, her robes darkened by centuries of service, her mask reflecting the dim light like black glass. Valeria had always been perceptive, able to read the currents of thought as easily as she read the reports delivered to the conclave. "And rightly so," she continued. "The patterns you follow are not merely anomalies, they are warnings. Something stirs beyond our perception, and yet close enough to touch the very bones of our order." Seraphine regarded her companion, noting the subtle tension beneath Valeria's calm exterior. "You sense it too, then?" she said quietly. "The fractures within our ranks, the subtle manipulations. Loyalty is no longer a certainty. The Imperium itself teeters on the edge of an unseen precipice." Valeria inclined her head slightly. "We cannot afford doubt, not when those who move in shadows will exploit even the smallest hesitation. And yet, there is more than strategy at play here. There is ambition, envy, and perhaps fear masquerading as duty. The Sisters of Silence are meant to be immune, but centuries of service do not inoculate us against the desires that linger in mortal hearts." Seraphine's eyes drifted to the observation ports overlooking the city below. The metropolis, though scarred and broken, remained alive with movement. Patrols and maintenance drones crossing the streets, citizens cautious yet persistent in their routines. Life persisted even in decay, stubborn as the last embers of a dying sun. She envied them, in a way, the freedom to act without the weight of centuries of memory, without the burden of silent judgment. Yet she could not turn away. Duty demanded action, and action demanded sacrifice. "Then we follow the threads," she said at last. "Every anomaly, every breach. We trace them to their source, no matter where it leads." Valeria's hand brushed the edge of a console, activating a series of holographic projections. Star systems flickered into view, their connections glowing in delicate web-like patterns. Some lights were steady, others flickering. Systems unstable, compromised, or entirely lost. "Orpheon is only the beginning," Valeria said. "Look here, here, and here. Minor sectors, perhaps insignificant in isolation, but together they form a pattern. Someone is deliberately eroding trust, subtly guiding entire fleets and administrations toward confusion and conflict." Seraphine studied the projections, noting the meticulousness of the manipulations. Communications were altered, patrols misdirected, and intelligence reports carefully fabricated. Whoever orchestrated this was skilled, patient, and aware of the sisters' methods. And yet, there was a signature, a detail so minute that only someone with her experience could detect it. a mark of pride, perhaps, or arrogance. This hand, she murmured, pointing at a faint, recurring anomaly within the data. It is deliberate, calculated. The manipulator wants us to see the fractures, but not the whole picture. Whoever they are, they presume we will react emotionally before understanding the full scope. They are clever, but not infallible. Valeria's mask tilted slightly, a gesture Seraphine had long since learned to read. And what do you propose we do, Seraphine? We cannot strike blindly. Action without foresight will only aid them, but hesitation risks allowing the fractures to spread beyond our control. Seraphine turned away from the holographic display, her gaze returning to the sprawling city below. We gather information, she said slowly, each word deliberate. We observe, infiltrate, and probe the anomalies without alerting those who seek to manipulate us. Patience will be our weapon and silence our shield. But there will come a time for confrontation, and when that day arrives, we must act decisively. Valeria remained silent, understanding the gravity of Seraphine's words. They were no longer merely guardians. They were hunters in a forest of shadows, tasked with rooting out ambition and treachery before it consumed everything. And in this task, there would be no margin for error. Hours passed in methodical study, the two sisters tracing patterns, cross-referencing reports, and analyzing intelligence from sectors that stretched for thousands of light years. Each discovery deepened the sense of unease. Entire fleets had been compromised, entire administrative hierarchies subtly influenced, and whispers of dissent seeded among those meant to serve loyally. The pattern was becoming a tapestry of calculated chaos. A soft chime echoed through the archives, signaling a new message from a distant outpost. Seraphine activated the display, revealing a transmission from a senior officer in a bordering sector. His face, worn with age and worry, flickered in the holographic projection. "Sisters of Silence," he began, voice strained. "We have encountered forces that should not exist. Loyal units are attacking one another without provocation. Communications have failed. We fear infiltration by agents unknown, possibly even of your order's enemies. Please, advise." Seraphine's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, the weight of centuries pressed upon her like the gravity of a dying star. "We will investigate," she said, tone calm, yet ironed with resolve. "Do not act independently. Preserve your forces, maintain order where possible, and await further instruction. We will find the source and end this corruption." The projection dissolved, leaving only the cold glow of the archive's consoles. Seraphine turned to Valeria, their eyes meeting behind the silver masks. In that silent exchange, no words were needed. They both understood the path ahead would demand sacrifices neither could yet quantify. Loyalty would be tested, trust questioned, and the lines between ally and adversary blurred beyond recognition. Seraphine moved toward the spire's lower decks, her robes whispering against the metal floors. The city below had grown quieter as night approached. But her mind was alive with the knowledge that the true darkness was not the absence of light. It was the presence of ambition, deception, and betrayal hiding in plain sight. The Sisters of Silence would have to navigate it with caution, precision, and unwavering resolve, for the survival of the Imperium depended on their vigilance, and in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, the stars continued their slow, mournful death. The galaxy watched, patient and unyielding, as Seraphine Kael prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, morality, and destiny would collide. The spire's lower decks were a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, their metallic walls humming faintly with the pulse of ancient machinery. Seraphine Kyle moved with quiet assurance, her presence alone commanding attention, though the sisters who crossed her path rarely dared speak. In this place, silence was both protection and weapon. She had walked these corridors countless times, yet today they felt different, as though the very walls held their breath in anticipation of what was to come. A low chime echoed through the passageways, signaling the arrival of a visitor. Seraphine turned, recognizing the figure even before the mask came into focus. Sister Lyanna, a prodigy among the Order, and one of the few whose insight Seraphine trusted implicitly, approached with measured steps. Her mask reflected the cold light of the corridor, concealing expressions that nonetheless trembled in her posture and gait. "Seraphine," Lyanna said, her voice carrying the precise balance of reverence and urgency that the sisters cultivated over centuries. "I have analyzed the recent anomalies in the outer sectors. The disruptions extend beyond Orpheon, affecting communications, patrol routes, and even planetary defenses. Someone is orchestrating this with intent and precision." Seraphine inclined her head slightly, acknowledging Lyanna's words. "I have observed the same. Patterns emerge, subtle but deliberate. This is no ordinary conflict, nor a simple rebellion. There is a mind behind it, a strategist with knowledge of our methods and our weaknesses." Lyanna hesitated, as though weighing the propriety of her next words. "It is my opinion," she said carefully, "that the threat may come from within the Order itself. The manipulations align too closely with the tactics of Sisters of Silence. Only someone with intimate knowledge of our operations could execute this so flawlessly." The weight of the suggestion pressed upon Seraphine like a physical force. She had long known that loyalty was fragile, even among those who had taken the solemn oaths of silence and service. But to suspect one of their own, to confront the possibility that ambition or resentment had taken root within the Order, was a burden heavier than any she had carried before. "Then we proceed with caution," she said finally, her voice calm but resolute. "We will investigate without alerting the conclave. If a sister has indeed betrayed us, exposure must be precise. Premature action could compromise the entire Order, and by extension, the Imperium itself." Lyanna nodded, relief faintly flickering in her posture at Seraphine's measured response. "I have already begun cross-referencing intelligence reports with deployment logs. There are discrepancies in unit assignments and unexplained delays in transmissions that may indicate covert manipulation. I believe these anomalies will lead us to the source if traced carefully." Seraphine studied the young sister, noting the meticulous precision in her analysis. Lyanna's mind, though untested by centuries as her own had been, was sharp, calculating, and daringly perceptive. In the coming trials, she would be invaluable, if, that is, they could ensure that she remained on the path of loyalty. Even the brightest among them were vulnerable to the subtle seductions of power and ambition. "Prepare a detailed report," Seraphine instructed. "We will need every fragment of information before we present anything to the conclave. If the manipulator anticipates us, then caution and strategy are our only defenses." Lyanna hesitated for a moment, then inclined her head and turned to the consoles lining the walls. The soft glow of holographic data illuminated her features as she began her work, fingers moving with deft precision over the controls. Seraphine remained where she stood, gazing out through a nearby observation port. The city below was quieter now, the remnants of daytime activity fading into a restless evening. Fires burned in scattered districts, their smoke drifting upward into the low atmosphere, mingling with the last light of the dying suns. In the quiet, Seraphine allowed herself a fleeting moment of reflection. She had walked the path of the sisters for centuries, watching civilizations rise and fall, empires flourish and decay. Immortality had granted her perspective, but it had also exacted a toll. She had seen loyalty tested, friendships shattered, and the seeds of betrayal planted in hearts she had once trusted. And now, the signs pointed to the impossible, that corruption had taken root within her own order. A soft vibration in her comm unit pulled her from contemplation. A transmission from the Orphean sectors appeared, encoded with urgency. She activated the display, revealing a senior officer's face, lined with worry and exhaustion. "Sister Kale," he said, voice strained. "Our patrols encountered anomalies on multiple planets. Units refused orders without explanation, and some have engaged one another in open conflict. We suspect infiltration, but cannot confirm the source. Please advise." Seraphine cut the transmission short, her mind already racing. "Maintain defensive positions," she instructed, her tone crisp and commanding. "Do not engage unless provoked. Preserve your forces. We will trace the source of this interference and restore order. Stand fast and trust that the Sisters of Silence will act where guidance is absent." The officer's image flickered before disappearing, leaving Seraphine alone once more. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm she had faced, filled with the knowledge that the Imperium's survival depended on the accuracy and speed of her judgment. Lyanna approached again, her expression unreadable behind the mask. "I have traced several points of irregularity," she said, gesturing to the holographic projections. "They converge on a series of outer colonies. The manipulations are subtle, yet consistent. Whoever is behind this understands the methods of our order intimately and anticipates our responses before we act. It is unnerving, to say the least." Seraphine nodded, her thoughts moving rapidly. "This is a battle of shadows, then," she said. "Not of fleets or armies, but of knowledge, perception, and influence. We must remain several steps ahead, anticipate every move, and act decisively when the time comes. Failure is not an option." The hours slipped by in meticulous planning. Patterns were mapped, anomalies documented, and strategies discussed in hushed, deliberate tones. Seraphine and Lyanna worked in tandem, their minds aligned in purpose, yet each was aware that the closer they drew to the truth, the more perilous the path became. There was no margin for error. Each discovery, each decision, could trigger the collapse of entire sectors, the erosion of loyalty, or the exposure of secrets meant to remain hidden. As night fell fully over the Orphean system, the dying suns casting a final crimson glow over the city, Seraphine Kyle stood once more at the observation port. The world below was fragile, beautiful, and imperiled. Beyond it, the galaxy waited, vast and indifferent, yet filled with threads of conflict and opportunity. Somewhere among those threads lay the source of the breaches, the architect of betrayal, and perhaps the answer to the question that had haunted her for centuries. How far would one's sister go in pursuit of ambition, and what price would be paid in silence? The galaxy held its breath, and Seraphine, with centuries of experience weighing upon her shoulders, prepared to step into the darkness where loyalty, ambition, and destiny would collide. The early hours of Orphean's night were cold, a biting chill that swept across the spire's outer decks, carrying with it the scent of smoldering ruins and ozone from damaged machinery. Seraphine Kale moved alone, her robes whispering softly against the metal floor, each step precise and deliberate. She had long since grown accustomed to walking the corridors of the Sisters of Silence in solitude, Yet tonight, the quiet pressed heavier than usual, thick with unspoken tension and anticipation. A soft vibration echoed through her comm unit, drawing her attention to a message flagged as urgent. The sender was Liana. She activated the transmission, the holographic display casting a pale blue light across Seraphine's stoic features. Liana's figure shimmered, tense and urgent. "Sister Kale," she began, voice controlled but quivering beneath the practiced calm. "I have uncovered a series of communications hidden within our archives, messages that suggest coordination from within. These are not random anomalies. They indicate deliberate misdirection, likely orchestrated by someone with access to intelligence only a sister could possess." Seraphine's jaw tightened, though her mask betrayed nothing. Betrayal had been an abstract threat for decades, a distant concept she had trained to anticipate, but to witness it manifest so closely was another matter entirely. She allowed herself a moment to process, then spoke with measured authority. "Gather everything you have. We will trace these communications, cross-reference them with deployment logs and planetary reports. Whoever is behind this is clever, but no one is infallible." Liana inclined her head, relief flickering across her posture at Seraphine's resolve. "Understood. I will proceed with caution. The data is complex, encrypted in layers designed to conceal even from the sisters themselves. It will take time to unravel." Time was a commodity Seraphine could spare in quantity, yet each passing moment carried weight. Every day that the manipulator remained unchecked, the cracks widened, alliances faltered, and the Imperium's stability eroded further. She stepped onto the observation deck, letting her gaze drift over the city below. Fires burned in isolated districts, casting long shadows across streets and towers. The city was a reflection of the Imperium itself, scarred, struggling, and teetering on the brink of collapse, yet stubbornly alive. A shadow shifted near the deck's entrance. Seraphine turned sharply, recognizing the figure immediately. Sister Althara, her longtime mentor, and one of the few whose counsel had guided Seraphine through the labyrinthine politics of the Order. Althara's mask caught the faint light, reflecting her eyes with a glimmer of concern. "You sense it, too," Althara said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "The fractures within our ranks are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper corruption, one that has grown unnoticed while we focused on outward threats." Seraphine nodded, moving to stand beside her mentor. "I have seen the threads, and they converge on patterns familiar only to those who understand the inner workings of the Order. Someone knows our methods, our routines, our weaknesses. The question is, who and why?" Althara's head tilted slightly, a subtle gesture of contemplation. "Ambition is often the root of such corruption. Desire for power, for influence, for recognition that even centuries of service cannot satiate. The manipulator may see themselves as a savior, a visionary, yet their actions are destructive." A bitter smile ghosted Seraphine's lips beneath the mask. She had seen ambition before, in mortal leaders, in generals, in even some of her own sisters. It had toppled empires, fractured alliances, and left trails of ruin that spanned star systems. To confront it within her own order was a different challenge entirely, a war waged not with fleets, but with trust, secrecy, and intellect. "You think it may be someone we know?" she asked, voice even, betraying none of the turmoil within. Althara's silence was answer enough. Seraphine's thoughts drifted to Liana, to her analytical brilliance, and to the possibility that even the brightest mind could be swayed by ideology or ambition. Every decision, every judgment would carry consequences far beyond the individual. The weight of centuries pressed upon her shoulders, a reminder that immortality was not freedom. It was responsibility magnified to the point of obsession. A soft chime interrupted her reflection, this time from her personal console. Reports from Orpheon's outlying sectors streamed in, each revealing escalating incidents, units turning on one another without cause, patrols disappearing, entire command hierarchies compromised. The pattern was unmistakable. The manipulator had reached into the very nerve centers of the Imperium, shaping events with subtle precision and deliberate care. Seraphine activated the display, her eyes scanning the information with methodical rigor. Each anomaly was mapped, each breach cross-referenced with intelligence logs and communications records. Patterns emerged, invisible to all but the most experienced eye. And there, hidden among layers of encrypted transmissions, was a signature, an echo of method and thought that suggested intimate knowledge of the sisters' operations. "This is no ordinary threat," she murmured to Althara. "This is a war of perception, of loyalty, of understanding. Whoever orchestrates this knows not only how we act, but how we think, and that makes them extraordinarily dangerous." Althara inclined her head, silent, her presence a reminder of the gravity of the situation. "Then we must act," she said finally, but carefully. A misstep could expose the Order to vulnerabilities we cannot repair. Every revelation must be deliberate, every maneuver calculated. We cannot afford error, Seraphine. Not now. The words resonated within her, reaffirming the path she had already chosen. The Sisters of Silence were guardians, observers, and instruments of judgment. To fail in their vigilance was unthinkable. And yet, the personal cost of maintaining that vigilance was profound. Loyalty had to be enforced not just through observation, but through the careful shaping of alliances, the subtle guidance of intentions, and the readiness to confront even those closest to them if treachery emerged. Hours passed in meticulous planning and analysis. Liana's projections illuminated anomalies across star systems, their subtle distortions hinting at the manipulator's next moves. Each discovery was a step closer to understanding, but also a step deeper into peril. Every revelation could spark fear, distrust, or even violence among those unprepared to face the reality of betrayal within their ranks. Finally, Seraphine allowed herself a moment to step back, gaze returning to the city below. Fires burned still, casting long shadows across fractured streets. The horizon glowed faintly with the last light of dying suns, a reminder of the galaxy's indifferent majesty. And within that quiet, Seraphine felt the weight of responsibility, the inevitability of sacrifice, and the first stirrings of doubt, not in her mission, but in those she served alongside. The galaxy, vast and unyielding, watched silently as Seraphine Kale prepared to trace the threads of deception through darkness, ambition, and betrayal. The path ahead would demand patience, precision, and courage, for the forces arrayed against her were not merely external. They had taken root within, hidden among the very sisters sworn to protect the Imperium. And in that realization lay the true test of the Sisters of Silence, to endure, to discern, and to act when even the bonds of loyalty had begun to unravel. The spire's corridors were quieter than usual that evening, yet the silence was tense, thick with anticipation. Seraphine Kyle moved among the shadows with practiced precision, her obsidian robes brushing softly against the polished metal floors. The faint hum of machinery, a constant presence in the heart of the spire, felt distant now, as if even the engines themselves were aware of the growing storm. Every step she took echoed the weight of centuries, of duty, and of the unrelenting vigilance that defined the Sisters of Silence. She paused at a junction where the corridors opened into a small observation chamber. The room's glass panels overlooked the outer sectors of Orpheon, where scattered lights from distant colonies blinked in the fading glow of the twin suns. Fires burned in isolated cities below, their smoke rising into the cold, thin atmosphere. It was a landscape of fragile endurance, a testament to life persisting even under the shadow of decay and betrayal. A soft chime drew her attention to a nearby console. Liana's projection flickered to life, her expression tense beneath the pale blue glow of the holo display. "Sister Kyle," Liana began, voice controlled yet trembling with urgency. "The manipulations we traced through the archives have expanded. Entire fleets have been misdirected. Patrols have engaged one another without orders, and communications across multiple systems have been compromised. The pattern indicates someone is not only skilled, but intimately familiar with the operational structure of the Sisters of Silence." Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath her mask. Betrayal, she knew, was rarely obvious. It crept quietly, infecting trust with subtlety. To think that one of their own, or perhaps a former ally, was orchestrating this chaos sent a ripple of unease through her centuries-hardened composure. "We follow the threads meticulously," she said finally, her tone even, deliberate. "We identify the source without alerting the conclave. Premature exposure could allow the manipulator to vanish or strike preemptively." Liana inclined her head, fingers moving deftly across the holo controls. "I have cross-referenced the anomalies with historical deployments. There are subtle patterns suggesting intent, not just opportunistic mischief. Someone is guiding events, shaping outcomes to destabilize trust and create divisions. The scale is unprecedented in the history of the Order." Seraphine's thoughts drifted to the subtle machinations she had seen over centuries. Mortal generals seduced by ambition, planetary governors corrupted by desire, and even her own sisters tempted by the promise of power. Immortality had provided her with perspective, but it had also offered clarity of vision. Patterns that mortals overlooked were evident to her, threads that wove the tapestry of conflict and betrayal into a discernible design. "The manipulator understands us," she murmured, more to herself than to Liana. "They anticipate our responses, predict our decisions. This is no ordinary threat. It is a war of intellect and influence, waged in shadows where even loyalty cannot shield us completely." A soft vibration in her comm unit drew her attention to a secondary transmission, one originating from the outer sectors. She activated it immediately. A senior officer appeared, face lined with worry and exhaustion. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice strained. "Our fleets have begun to fragment. Units are refusing orders without explanation, and there are reports of skirmishes between forces that were supposed to operate in unison. We suspect infiltration, but we cannot confirm the source. Your guidance is critical." Seraphine's gaze swept across the star systems projected before her. Each anomaly was a thread in a larger tapestry, subtle and deliberate. The manipulator had not only destabilized communication and patrols, but had also sown confusion and mistrust among the very structures meant to protect these worlds. "Preserve your forces," she instructed with calm authority. "Do not engage unless directly provoked. Maintain defensive positions. We will trace the source and neutralize it. Trust that the Sisters of Silence will act where guidance is absent." The transmission ended, leaving only the faint hum of machinery and the quiet rustle of her robes. Seraphine turned to Liana, whose fingers hovered over the hollow controls, scanning and analyzing the latest data. The breaches extend further than we initially thought, Liana said softly. It is as though the manipulator wishes to test us, to observe our reactions, to gauge our capacity for discernment and response. Seraphine nodded, understanding the implicit warning. Then we proceed with caution, but with decisiveness. Every pattern traced, every anomaly documented brings us closer to the source. But we must remain vigilant. A single misstep could provide them an advantage we cannot recover from. They worked in silence for hours, mapping anomalies, analyzing transmissions, and cross-referencing operational logs. Each discovery deepened the sense of unease. Fleets redirected without orders, patrols vanishing into sectors without trace, entire command structures destabilized. The manipulator's precision suggested not only familiarity with their operational protocols, but also patience and foresight beyond that of most mortals. Finally, Seraphine allowed herself to step back and observe the results of their labor. The patterns, though intricate and multi-layered, began to form a coherent design, a strategy of quiet subversion, of chaos orchestrated to weaken the Imperium from within. Each anomaly, once isolated and seemingly random, now revealed itself as part of a deliberate, cunning plan. We are dealing with someone capable of seeing the future as we see the past, Seraphine murmured. Her voice carried an edge of both respect and apprehension. This is no mere saboteur or rogue agent. This is a mind attuned to the order, to our methods, and to our weaknesses. Whoever they are, they will not stop until they are either discovered or satisfied with the outcome of their manipulations. Liana's eyes met hers behind the mask, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the task ahead. What if this manipulator is one of us? She asked quietly. What if they have long served in silence and now act out of ambition or conviction? Seraphine's fingers brushed against the console, tracing a line of faint light in the holographic projection. Then we are forced to confront a truth that all sisters dread. Loyalty is never absolute, and vigilance must extend even to those we trust most. The path ahead is perilous, but it is our duty to follow it. Every decision, every revelation, every confrontation may shape the fate of the Imperium itself. The city below continued its slow, fragile existence under the fading glow of dying suns. Fires smoldered, shadows lengthened, and the cold night air carried with it the scent of both decay and endurance. Within the spire, Seraphine, Kale, and Liana worked, tracing threads of deception, preparing to confront betrayal wherever it might be found. And as the hours stretched into the indifferent vastness of night, the galaxy itself seemed to pause, waiting to see whether the Sisters of Silence would uncover the manipulator's hand before the fractures became irreparable, before loyalty was tested beyond its limits, and before the shadows claimed what light remained. The outer sectors of Orpheon were no longer merely distant points of light on a map. They had become a theatre of uncertainty, each system a stage where loyalty and treachery collided in subtle, devastating ways. Seraphine Kyle stood on the bridge of the observation platform, aboard the silent command vessel Aegis of Silence, her gaze fixed on the starfields beyond. Even in the void, the fractures of the Imperium's influence were visible, like fissures in frozen ice, each one threatening to expand under the right pressure. The vessel hummed quietly, a living organism of steel and technology. Servitors moved with precise, unhesitant motions, maintaining systems, monitoring communications, and performing tasks that mortals would find monotonous. Yet even their mechanical diligence could not mask the weight of the galaxy pressing down upon the sisters. Each anomaly, in Orpheon and beyond, was a thread leading somewhere dark, and the pattern they traced suggested a mind of extraordinary cunning and foresight. "Status report," Seraphine commanded, her voice steady and calm, though beneath it lay a tension forged over centuries. A young sister approached, fingers hovering over a console. "Sister Kale, fleet deviations continue. Patrols redirected, communications corrupted, and isolated skirmishes reported on 3 outer planets. Logs indicate anomalies matching previous breaches, but with subtle variations, deliberate, calculated. Whoever is orchestrating this is learning, adapting to our responses." Seraphine's eyes narrowed, focusing on the points of light that represented entire civilizations, now teetering on the edge of chaos. "Prepare an interception protocol," she said. "We will shadow the manipulated fleets, observe their movements, and trace them to their origin. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Any confrontation now risks tipping off the manipulator." A brief silence followed, the hum of machinery the only companion to the vast emptiness of space. Then the young sister added, "There are irregular readings, sister. Something is moving alongside these fleets, undetected by conventional sensors. We cannot determine whether it is a vessel, a construct, or something else." Seraphine felt the familiar chill of caution settle over her. The unknown had always been her greatest adversary, more dangerous than betrayal, more insidious than fire or fleet. "Prepare enhanced scans," she ordered. "We will observe, catalogue, and analyze. Whatever this is, we will uncover its nature. Nothing remains hidden from the Sisters of Silence for long." Minutes stretched into hours as the Aegis shadowed the fleets, observing subtle maneuvers and anomalies. Patterns emerged, patrols misdirected, supply lines disrupted, and tactical decisions subtly altered. The manipulator's reach extended beyond the visible, threading influence through every echelon of command and communication. Each anomaly reinforced the terrifying truth. The enemy understood not only the Imperium, but the methods of the Sisters themselves. Seraphine's thoughts drifted briefly to Lyanna, whose brilliance had revealed the initial fractures. The young sister's mind was now indispensable in the hunt, yet even her insight could not fully anticipate the manipulator's next moves. Immortality had given Seraphine perspective. It had allowed her to see patterns where others saw chaos, but even she could not yet grasp the full scope of the threat. A soft vibration interrupted her reflection. The comm unit flickered with a secure transmission. Seraphine activated it, revealing a face she had not expected to see, Sister Althara. Her masked visage appeared tense, and her voice carried a weight that instantly commanded attention. "Seraphine," she began, "I have discovered a cluster of anomalies in the inner sectors. These are not related to Orpheon directly, but they bear the signature of manipulation we traced previously. Someone is expanding the strategy, testing new methods, and possibly drawing attention away from their ultimate objective." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Expansion suggested boldness and confidence, yet it also revealed vulnerability. The manipulator believed themselves untouchable, clever enough to orchestrate chaos from the shadows. But arrogance often preceded miscalculation. "Prepare a tactical overlay," she said. "We will coordinate observations with the inner sectors. I want cross-references of every anomaly, every deviation, and every irregular fleet maneuver. Whoever is behind this believes in their invisibility, but we will illuminate their movements." Althara's projection paused, then inclined slightly. "Be aware, sister. The manipulator may be closer than you imagine. We cannot rule out the possibility that one of our own has been compromised, acting in secrecy for reasons we cannot yet discern. Trust must be balanced with caution. The words landed like a hammer, echoing in the hollow spaces of Seraphine's mind. Trust, she realized, had become a fragile instrument. The closer the manipulation drew, the more impossible it became to know friend from foe. Even those sworn to eternal vigilance could be swayed by ambition, ideology, or the subtle lure of power. Seraphine moved to the central console, her fingers tracing the holographic projection of fleets and star systems. Lines of light traced paths, intersecting and diverging, creating a complex web of activity across hundreds of light years. The manipulator's hand was evident in every deviation, every subtle misalignment, every unanticipated delay. It was a puzzle designed not merely to test fleets, but to unravel the discipline and loyalty of those charged with maintaining order. "We will divide observation teams," Seraphine instructed, her mind moving faster than the holographic projections could update. One team monitors the outer sectors, another shadows the inner anomalies. We will cross-reference every maneuver, every misdirected patrol, and every disrupted communication. We will not confront directly until we are certain of the manipulator's identity and location. Precision, patience, and silence are our weapons. Althara inclined her head in acknowledgement, her presence a grounding force amid the tension. "And what of loyalty, sister?" she asked quietly. "How do we measure it when the very structure meant to protect it has been compromised? How do we discern truth when deception is so carefully wrought?" Seraphine turned from the projection, her eyes scanning the dark expanse of stars. "We measure it by observation, by discernment, and by consequence," she said softly. "Loyalty is not assumed, it is earned, tested, and proven. The manipulator will reveal themselves in action, and when they do, we will be ready. Until that moment, patience is our armor, silence our shield, and vigilance our only ally." The bridge of the Aegis fell into a tense quiet. The only sound the hum of machinery and the soft, measured breathing of the sisters aboard. Outside, the galaxy stretched vast and indifferent, a canvas of stars and void upon which battles of loyalty, strategy, and ambition would be fought. Somewhere in that infinite expanse, the manipulator moved, confident, calculating, and patient. Yet Seraphine Kale and the Sisters of Silence had centuries of vigilance on their side, and they would not falter. As the hours passed and observation teams reported new anomalies, Seraphine felt the familiar weight of time pressing down upon her. Immortality granted perspective, but it also carried the relentless burden of responsibility. Every action, every decision, every observation was part of a delicate balance that could tip the fate of entire sectors. And in the quiet, stretching void, Seraphine Kale prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would collide. The void beyond Orpheon had never felt heavier. The Aegis of Silence glided through the black expanse, its hull reflecting distant stars like shards of cold crystal. And Seraphine Kale stood upon the observation deck, feeling the weight of centuries pressing upon her shoulders. Outside, the fleet movements of outer sectors formed intricate patterns, each deviation a subtle note in the symphony of manipulation she was unraveling. Every light in the darkness represented life, loyalty, and trust, now strained by forces unseen, yet devastatingly precise. A low chime announced a new transmission. Seraphine activated it, revealing Sister Liana's pale blue projection. Her fingers hovered over controls, her mask reflecting the faint glow. Sister Kyle, Liana began, voice tight with concentration. I have identified new anomalies within several inner systems. These are not mere misdirections. They are coordinated actions designed to provoke conflict between fleets and planetary defenses. If executed, they could fracture our strategic position entirely. Seraphine's hands brushed the railing as she leaned forward, studying the holographic star field that now displayed a web of manipulated movements. And the source? She asked softly, though her mind had already begun tracing possibilities. Liana shook her head. Not yet, sister. The patterns are consistent with the signature we identified previously, but each move is cloaked with layers of misdirection. Whoever is orchestrating this anticipates our deductions, adapting as we analyze. It is a form of psychological warfare as much as tactical manipulation. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. The manipulator's hand was everywhere yet nowhere, guiding chaos with subtlety and precision. To confront them too soon would risk disaster. To wait too long would allow the fractures to spread irreparably. Prepare enhanced observation protocols, she instructed. We shadow every fleet, every convoy, every transmission. Nothing leaves the system without our scrutiny. This manipulator believes themselves invisible, but shadows are still bound by light. A soft vibration in the console interrupted her reflection. Another secure transmission, this one from a remote sector guard post. A commander's face appeared, etched with worry. Sister Kyle, he said, voice trembling. We have engaged hostile forces, but there are no clear orders. Units are attacking one another. Our reports suggest infiltration. Orders are being corrupted. We cannot identify the instigator. Guidance is imperative. Seraphine's jaw tightened. The manipulator had escalated their actions from subtle interference to direct provocation. Entire fleets were now at risk, and with each misaligned order, lives were lost. Hold your positions, she said with deliberate authority. Do not engage unless attacked. Preserve your forces and report every irregularity. We will identify the source and end this manipulation. Liana's projection flickered, her hands tracing the complex web of fleet positions. Sister Kyle, I believe the manipulator may be drawing attention to secondary objectives, distractions designed to fragment our focus. These outer conflicts may be intended to mask a larger operation. If correct, there is an ultimate target we have yet to identify. Seraphine's mind raced. The manipulator was patient, intelligent, and calculating, testing the limits of their vigilance while simultaneously probing the strengths and weaknesses of the Imperium. To engage prematurely would play into the manipulator's hands. To hesitate too long risked catastrophic loss. Strategy and judgment were paramount, yet the human element, loyalty, fear, doubt, could not be discounted. A subtle vibration echoed through the observation deck as a new report appeared. An inner-system planetary defense grid had engaged friendly patrols, resulting in catastrophic losses. The evidence of manipulation was undeniable. Seraphine turned from the projection to the viewports, where stars stretched infinitely, indifferent and silent. We are dealing with a mind, she murmured, one that understands us, our orders, and our limits. This is no random act of rebellion. It is intentional, precise, and patient. Althara's presence emerged behind her, silent as ever. Patience is both our ally and our curse, she said softly, her voice carrying centuries of understanding. The closer we draw to the truth, the more dangerous the path becomes. Remember, Seraphine, the manipulator may be someone we trust, or someone we once trusted. Seraphine nodded, though her hands remained firm upon the railing. Trust, she knew, was fragile. The very foundation of the Sisters of Silence, their discipline, their loyalty, their collective purpose, was being tested. And the weight of centuries of vigilance could not insulate them from ambition, ideology, or hidden resentment. Prepare tactical contingencies, she said finally. We will maintain observation, track every anomaly, and coordinate with every fleet under our purview. When the manipulator reveals themselves through action, we will strike decisively. Until then, we are hunters in the shadows, unseen yet omnipresent. Lyanna inclined her head. I will compile enhanced projections and trace deviations across all systems. The manipulator may anticipate our response, but every movement leaves a signature. Every deviation has a trace, and we will follow it. The hours passed in meticulous observation, each anomaly documented, each fleet movement analyzed, and each planetary report cross-referenced. The manipulator's strategy became clearer. A slow, deliberate escalation designed to test the Imperium's defenses while exposing fractures in loyalty and command. The scale and patience required for such an operation were staggering, yet the pattern was there, etched into the stars and the movement of vessels across the void. Seraphine allowed herself a moment to reflect, her gaze lingering on the distant planets now caught in the manipulator's web. Fires burned in isolated cities, fleets hesitated in orbit, and command chains faltered under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, held its breath, watching as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat that was equal parts intellect and deception. A subtle vibration drew her attention to another incoming report. This one bore chilling news. A critical fleet had been manipulated into engaging an allied force, resulting in the near-total destruction of both units. The manipulator's audacity had escalated beyond subtlety. It was now a game of life and death, of trust and betrayal, with consequences measured in blood and ruin. Seraphine turned from the console, her eyes meeting Althara's behind the masks that concealed centuries of thought and emotion. We are on the cusp, she said quietly. The manipulator will act again. When they do, we must be ready to respond decisively. Victory will not be won through fleet strength alone. It will be won through understanding, patience, and the discernment of loyalty. The galaxy watches, and the consequences of failure are unthinkable. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, silent and indifferent. Yet within the silence, a battle of minds and wills was underway, hidden, precise, and inevitable. Seraphine Kale, centuries of experience guiding her hand, prepared to step into the shadows where strategy, betrayal, and destiny would collide. The hunt was no longer theoretical. It had become urgent, personal, and absolute. The cold void of space stretched infinitely, a canvas of darkness pierced only by distant stars. Yet Seraphine Kale felt the weight of the galaxy pressing upon her shoulders. The Aegis of Silence glided silently among the fleet, its hull reflecting pinpoints of light like frozen fire. Even the hum of machinery seemed subdued, as if the ship itself understood the gravity of the storm, gathering across the sectors. The manipulator's influence had grown bolder, and the fractures within the Imperium deepened with every calculated move. A soft chime announced a secure transmission. Seraphine activated it immediately, revealing the pale projection of Sister Lyanna, her fingers poised above the controls. Sister Kale, Lyanna began, voice taut with urgency. The anomalies have escalated. Entire fleets are now misaligned, and several planetary defenses have engaged one another. There are signs that the manipulator is now actively testing the Order's capacity to respond under pressure. Their methods suggest both strategy and personal intent, targeting loyalty as much as territory. Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath the mask. Loyalty, she knew, was the axis upon which the Imperium turned, yet here it was, being weaponized. "We continue observation," she said calmly, masking the tension she felt within. "Engage no direct confrontation unless provoked. Document every irregularity. Our patience is a weapon. Their arrogance will be their vulnerability." Lyanna's holographic form flickered as she traced fleet movements and planetary anomalies. "There is a pattern emerging," she said slowly. "The manipulator is guiding events to converge at specific sectors. It appears they intend to provoke a decisive engagement, testing both loyalty and the strategic judgment of the Imperium. If we do not anticipate it, entire systems may fall before we can act." Seraphine considered the projection for a long moment. Patterns revealed intent, and intent revealed character. Whoever had orchestrated these manipulations was not merely skilled. They were patient, cunning, and confident in their ability to remain unseen. That confidence, however, was also a weakness. Every carefully constructed action left traces, and even the cleverest manipulator could not erase the fingerprints of their method entirely. "Prepare enhanced observation protocols," Seraphine ordered. "We will shadow every fleet, every convoy, every command transmission. Nothing occurs without our scrutiny. The manipulator believes in invisibility, but shadows are never without depth." A subtle vibration in the console interrupted her focus. Another secure transmission, this one from an outlying planetary command station, flickered to life. The commander's face appeared, etched with worry and exhaustion. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice trembling. "Our fleets have begun to fragment further. Units are engaging one another without orders. Communications are corrupted, and we cannot identify the instigator. Immediate guidance is imperative." Seraphine's hands hovered above the console as she absorbed the report. The manipulator's reach had extended beyond observation and interference. It was now provocation, designed to fracture both morale and command. "Hold positions," she instructed. "Do not engage unless attacked. Preserve forces. Report every anomaly. The Sisters of Silence will uncover the source and bring resolution." Lyanna's eyes met Seraphine's behind the mask, a silent acknowledgement of the escalating danger. "The manipulator is not only testing fleets," she said quietly. "They are probing the order itself, observing responses, measuring loyalty, and identifying weaknesses. Every misalignment, every hesitation, every error provides them insight into how we act." Seraphine's gaze swept across the projected star systems. The web of anomalies was complex, multi-layered, and deliberately obfuscating. Each deviation was a test, and the manipulator's intent was clear: to erode confidence, to fracture trust, and to reveal the fault lines within both the fleets and the Sisters of Silence themselves. Althara's presence emerged behind her, silent as the void beyond the viewport. "Patience and discernment are our greatest tools," she said softly. "But even they are not infallible. The manipulator may be someone we trust, or someone we once trusted. We must remain vigilant and prepared for treachery in forms we cannot yet anticipate." Seraphine nodded, her fingers brushing the console as she traced fleet movements across light years of distance. Trust had always been a delicate instrument. Now it had become both a liability and a necessity. To misplace it was to invite disaster. To deny it entirely was to paralyze the Order's capacity for action. Every decision, every observation, every inference would carry the weight of life and death. The hours passed with meticulous care. Fleets were tracked, anomalies catalogued, and planetary reports cross-referenced. Patterns emerged, revealing a method to the manipulator's madness. It was subtle, patient, and profoundly strategic. A war waged through intellect, foresight, and the exploitation of loyalty itself. Seraphine allowed herself a moment to gaze at the distant stars. Fires burned on worlds below. Fleets hovered in tenuous orbit, and command hierarchies strained under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, seemed to hold its breath, watching as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat that was equal parts intellect, manipulation, and ambition. A subtle vibration drew her attention to another report. A fleet in a contested sector had been manipulated into engaging a friendly unit, resulting in catastrophic losses. The audacity of the manipulator had escalated beyond misdirection. It was now action, provocation, and calculation in equal measure. Every casualty was a message, every deviation a test of observation, loyalty, and judgment. Seraphine turned from the console, her eyes meeting Althara's. "We are nearing the threshold," she said softly. "The manipulator will act again, and when they do, we must respond with precision. Victory is not measured in numbers alone. It will be measured in understanding, foresight, and the capacity to anticipate both action and consequence. The galaxy watches, indifferent but unforgiving, and our choices will reverberate across systems. Outside, the void remained silent, infinite, and unmoving. Yet within the aegis of silence, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator moved unseen, confident, precise, patient. And Seraphine Kyle, centuries of vigilance guiding her hand, prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would collide. The Sisters of Silence, guardians of truth and judgment, waited in that darkness. The hunter had become the hunted, and the hunt was no longer theoretical. It was immediate, relentless, and unavoidable. Every observation, every calculation, every shadowed step was now a measure of life and death, of trust and betrayal, of the fragile balance between the light of loyalty and the dark of ambition. Seraphine's mind traced the next moves, her centuries of experience illuminating possibilities, outcomes, and consequences. Somewhere among the stars, the manipulator moved, and the collision of strategy, loyalty, and deception was imminent. The void itself seemed to lean closer, patient and indifferent, as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat that had grown too clever, too bold, and too personal to ignore. And the darkness of space was pierced by the faint glimmer of distant stars, yet even their cold light could not reach the tension simmering aboard the aegis of silence. Seraphine Kale moved along the observation deck, her presence as precise and deliberate as ever, yet the weight of centuries bore heavily upon her shoulders. Every report, every anomaly, every misaligned fleet movement deepened the unease within her. The manipulator had grown bolder, and the consequences of inaction were becoming increasingly dire. A soft chime resonated through the bridge, drawing her attention to the hollow console. Liana's pale blue projection shimmered to life, her posture tense, fingers poised over the controls. "Sister Kyle," she began, voice taut with urgency. "Our analysis indicates that the manipulator is now coordinating multiple engagements simultaneously. Entire fleets are being directed to conflict zones without orders. Planetary defense grids are compromised, and preliminary reports suggest casualties are mounting. The scale of manipulation is unprecedented." Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath the mask, but her voice remained calm, measured. "We anticipated escalation," she said softly. Prepare observation protocols for all affected sectors. Track every fleet, every transmission, every irregularity. We will not engage directly until the manipulator reveals themselves through action. Patience is our weapon. Precision, our shield. Liana's projection flickered as she traced fleet movements across the starfield. There are anomalies within the inner sectors as well, she continued. These are subtle, discreet, but they indicate deliberate misdirection designed to provoke conflict among command hierarchies. The manipulator understands both strategy and psychology. They are not merely guiding fleets, they are testing loyalty, exposing vulnerabilities, and measuring response. Seraphine nodded slowly, her mind absorbing the implications. The manipulator's strategy was multifaceted, combining tactical genius with an intimate understanding of the Sisters of Silence themselves. Each deviation, each calculated error, was a probe into both the structure and the psyche of the Imperium. To counter it required more than observation. It demanded insight, foresight, and an unwavering clarity of judgment. A vibration in the console drew her attention to a new, secure transmission. The face of a planetary commander appeared, etched with worry and exhaustion. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice strained. "Our forces are engaging one another without orders. Communications have been corrupted, and confusion spreads rapidly. Entire sectors are at risk. Guidance is urgently required." Seraphine's hands hovered over the console as she digested the report. The manipulator had escalated from subtle misdirection to direct provocation. Every fleet engagement risked not only lives, but the very stability of the Imperium. "Hold positions," she instructed with deliberate authority. "Engage only if attacked. Document every deviation. The Sisters of Silence will identify the source and neutralize the threat. Maintain composure. Patience is essential." Althara's presence emerged behind her, silent yet commanding. "Patience and vigilance are our tools," she said quietly, her voice carrying centuries of understanding. "But even they are tested when betrayal resides within the ranks. The closer we trace this manipulator, the more likely they will strike at those we trust." Seraphine turned from the console, her eyes meeting Althara's behind the mask. Trust, she knew, had always been fragile. Now it was weaponized. The manipulator's ability to erode confidence and loyalty within the Order was as dangerous as any fleet or weapon. Every observation, every calculation, every decision carried consequences measured in lives and the fate of worlds. The hours passed in a tense rhythm of observation, analysis, and silent reflection. Fleets moved with ghostly precision, every deviation catalogued, every anomaly cross-referenced, every command scrutinized. The manipulator's hand was evident in the chaos, subtle, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Patterns emerged, revealing a strategy not just of disruption, but of psychological warfare, aimed at unraveling the bonds of loyalty that sustained the Imperium's defenses. Seraphine allowed herself a brief moment to observe the distant stars. Fires burned on worlds below. Fleets hovered in tenuous orbits, and command hierarchies strained under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, watched as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat that was equal parts intellect, manipulation, and ambition. Another report flickered onto the console, detailing the destruction of a critical fleet due to manipulated orders. Casualties were high, the impact immediate and stark. The manipulator's audacity had escalated beyond mere misdirection. It was provocation, designed to test the limits of patience, judgment, and loyalty. Every loss carried a message, every deviation a calculated probe into the resolve of the order. Seraphine's fingers brushed the console as she traced fleet movements across light years. "We are approaching a decisive threshold," she murmured. "The manipulator will act again, and when they do, we must respond with precision. Victory is measured not by numbers alone, but by insight, foresight, and understanding. The galaxy is indifferent, but the consequences of failure are unforgiving." Lyanna's projection nodded, silent acknowledgement of the escalating threat. "The manipulator may be someone we trust, or someone we once trusted," she said softly. "Their knowledge of the order is profound, and their patience is deliberate. Every movement leaves a trace, and we must follow it without falter." Seraphine's mind raced, mapping possibilities, outcomes, and potential responses. The collision of strategy, loyalty, and deception was inevitable. Somewhere in the vast darkness, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, precise, and patient. But even the most patient can be misled, and even the cleverest can leave a trail. The void outside remained silent, infinite, and unmoving. Yet aboard the aegis of silence, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator's next move would reveal not just their objective, but their identity, and the Sisters of Silence were prepared to respond with the precision demanded by centuries of vigilance. Seraphine Kyle, a figure forged by time, discipline, and duty, prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would converge. The hunt had evolved from observation to engagement, from vigilance to confrontation. Every action, every calculation, every shadowed decision was now a measure of life and death, trust and betrayal, and the fragile balance between the light of loyalty and the darkness of ambition. In the quiet hum of the bridge, amid the soft glow of holographic projections, Seraphine felt the inexorable pull of inevitability. The manipulator had shown their hand through chaos, through subtle provocation, and through the testing of loyalty. The collision was coming, and the outcome would shape the fate of entire sectors, the structure of the Imperium, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. The void of space was a cold, silent witness to the unfolding chaos, yet within its depths, the subtle pulse of conflict had grown almost tangible. Seraphine Kale stood on the observation deck of the Aegis of Silence, her presence unwavering, though the weight of centuries pressed heavily upon her. Reports streamed in from every sector under her purview, each carrying signs of manipulation, betrayal, and fractured command. The manipulator's influence was no longer subtle. It had become a pervasive force, shaping both strategy and perception, loyalty and doubt. Lyanna's projection flickered to life beside her, pale blue light illuminating the darkened deck. "Sister Kale," she said, voice taut with urgency. "The manipulator's tactics are escalating. Entire fleets are being maneuvered into conflict zones without orders. Planetary defenses are firing on allied units. Casualties are mounting, and morale is beginning to waver. Their hand is deliberate, patient, and calculated." Seraphine's gaze swept across the starfield projected before her. Light years of space, entire fleets, and countless worlds, all now threads in the manipulator's design. "We anticipated escalation," she murmured. "Prepare observation grids for all affected sectors. No engagement unless provoked. Patience and precision are our weapons." Lyanna's eyes traced the intricate paths of fleet movements. "There are patterns within patterns," she said. "The manipulator is not simply provoking conflict. They are studying our responses, measuring loyalty, observing hesitation and decisiveness. This is psychological warfare as much as tactical. Every misstep will be noted, every hesitation exploited." Seraphine's thoughts flickered to the possibilities. A mind capable of such strategy was not only intelligent, but intimately familiar with the operational structure of the Sisters of Silence. Every subtle deviation, every concealed action, bore the signature of a mind both patient and audacious. The manipulator understood not only the mechanics of fleets, but the psychology of those commanding them. To counter such a foe required insight, foresight, and an unerring discipline honed over centuries. A soft vibration drew her attention to a secure transmission. The face of a planetary commander appeared, etched with worry and exhaustion. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice trembling. "Units have engaged one another without orders. Communications have been corrupted, and the chain of command falters. Entire systems are at risk. Immediate guidance is required." Seraphine's jaw tightened. The manipulator's escalation was no longer hypothetical. It had become deadly. "Hold positions," she commanded, voice deliberate and calm. "Engage only if attacked. Document every deviation, every anomaly. The Sisters of Silence will identify the instigator. Preserve your forces. Patience is paramount." Althara emerged behind her, silent yet commanding. "Patience and vigilance remain our strongest tools," she said quietly. "Yet even they are tested when betrayal is within the ranks. The closer we draw, the more likely they will strike at those we trust, and the more difficult it becomes to discern friend from foe." Seraphine's mind traced the intricate web of fleet movements across the sectors. Trust had always been fragile. Now it was weaponized. The manipulator's hand sought not only to disrupt, but to erode confidence, to fracture the bonds that held both fleets and the Sisters of Silence together. Every observation, every calculation, every decision carried consequences measured in lives and the stability of the Imperium. Hours passed in meticulous observation. Fleets moved like pieces on a board, every deviation catalogued, every anomaly cross-referenced, every command scrutinized. The manipulator's presence was evident in the chaos, subtle, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Patterns emerged, revealing not only strategy but intent, a methodical unraveling of trust, authority, and cohesion. Seraphine allowed herself a brief moment to gaze at the distant stars. Fires burned on distant planets. Fleets hovered in tenuous orbits, and command structures strained under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, bore silent witness to the preparations of the Sisters of Silence as they poised to confront a threat both cunning and patient. A subtle vibration heralded another report. A fleet in a contested sector had been manipulated into engaging a friendly unit, resulting in catastrophic losses. The audacity of the manipulator had escalated beyond mere misdirection. It was deliberate provocation, a calculated test of loyalty, command, and judgment. Every loss, every deviation was a message, a probe into the psyche and resolve of the Order. Seraphine's fingers traced the projections across light years of space. "We are approaching a decisive threshold," she murmured. "The manipulator will act again. When they do, we must respond with precision. Victory is measured not by the strength of fleets alone, but by understanding, foresight, and the capacity to anticipate both action and consequence. The galaxy watches, indifferent but unforgiving." Liana's projection inclined slightly, silent acknowledgement of the escalating danger. The manipulator may be someone we trust, or someone we once trusted, she said softly. Their knowledge of our structures is profound, and their patience is deliberate. Every movement leaves a trace, and we must follow it without falter. Seraphine's mind worked in rapid calculation, mapping possibilities, outcomes, and contingencies. The collision of strategy, loyalty, and deception was inevitable. Somewhere within the stars, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, precise, and patient. Yet patience can falter, and the cleverest hand may leave a mark too subtle to hide. Outside, the void remained silent, infinite, and unyielding. Yet aboard the aegis of silence, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator's next move would not only reveal their objective but their identity. The Sisters of Silence had prepared for confrontation with every calculation, every observation, and every shadowed step now a measure of life and death, trust and betrayal, loyalty and ambition. Seraphine Kale, centuries of vigilance guiding her hand, prepared to step into the shadows where destiny, deception, and loyalty would collide. The hunt had evolved from observation to anticipation, from patience to confrontation. Every action, every calculation, every hidden maneuver now carried the potential to reshape the fate of sectors, fleets, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. And in the quiet hum of the bridge, amid the soft glow of holographic projections and the endless expanse of the galaxy beyond, the inevitability of collision pressed down, unseen but palpable. The manipulator had revealed their hand through chaos, through subtle provocation, and through the testing of loyalty. Now the convergence approached, and the consequences would echo across the stars. The void beyond Orpheon shimmered faintly, but the light did little to pierce the shadows that now stretched across the Imperium's fleets. Seraphine Kale stood on the observation deck of the Aegis of Silence, her presence as steady as the ship's hum, though the weight of centuries pressed upon her. The manipulator's influence had intensified, and the fractures within the Imperium's command structures were now visible, undeniable, and devastatingly effective. Each report brought new evidence of betrayal, deception, and chaos, and with every passing hour, the threat loomed closer. Lyanna's projection flickered to life beside her, pale blue against the cold steel of the observation deck. "Sister Kyle," she said, voice tight with urgency. "The manipulator has orchestrated simultaneous fleet engagements across multiple sectors. Several planetary defenses have misidentified Allied units as threats, resulting in catastrophic losses. Entire fleets are now disoriented, misaligned, and vulnerable. The scale of manipulation is unparalleled." Seraphine's hands brushed the console, tracing the complex web of fleet movements and planetary anomalies. "We anticipated escalation," she said softly, though the tension in her mind mirrored the chaos outside. "Deploy enhanced observation protocols. Engage only if directly threatened. Our patience is a weapon, our precision a shield. We must understand their strategy before striking." Lyanna's eyes traced lines of movement across the starfield, her fingers pausing at critical points. "There are subtle patterns," she said. "The manipulator is testing our responses, observing hesitation, measuring decisiveness, and probing loyalty. This is psychological warfare as much as it is tactical. Every decision we make is analyzed and exploited. The enemy understands not just strategy, but the mind of the order itself." Seraphine's gaze hardened. A mind capable of such manipulation was not only brilliant, but intimate with the Sisters of Silence, their methods, and their expectations. Each subtle deviation, each calculated error, bore the mark of patience and audacity. To counter such a foe required more than observation. It demanded insight, foresight, and unwavering discipline honed over centuries. A vibration in the console drew her attention to a new, secure transmission. The commander of a key planetary defense station appeared, face etched with exhaustion and fear. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice trembling. Units have begun engaging one another without orders. Communications have been corrupted. The chain of command falters. Entire systems are at risk. Guidance is required immediately. Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath her mask. The manipulator had escalated beyond subtle interference. Provocation had become open, deliberate, and deadly. Hold your positions, she instructed, calm yet firm. Engage only if attacked. Document every anomaly. The Sisters of Silence will identify the instigator. Preserve your forces. Patience is paramount. Althara's presence emerged behind Seraphine, silent yet commanding. Patience and vigilance are our strongest tools, she said quietly. Yet even they are tested when betrayal comes from within. The closer we trace this manipulator, the more likely they will strike at those we trust, and the more difficult it becomes to discern friend from foe. Seraphine's mind traced fleet movements across sectors, calculating possibilities, outcomes, and contingencies. Trust, long a fragile instrument, was now weaponized. The manipulator sought not just to disrupt, but to erode confidence and fracture bonds, exposing vulnerabilities within both fleets and the Sisters of Silence. Every observation, every decision, every inference carried consequences measured in lives and the stability of the Imperium. Hours passed with meticulous care. Fleets moved like ghostly pieces on an infinite board. Every deviation catalogued, every anomaly cross-referenced, every command scrutinized. The manipulator's hand was evident in the chaos, subtle, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Patterns emerged, revealing strategy and intent, a methodical unraveling of trust, authority, and cohesion that tested both skill and resolve. Seraphine allowed herself a brief moment to gaze at distant stars. Fires burned on planets below. Fleets hovered in tense orbits, and command structures strained under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, observed silently as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat, equal parts intellect, cunning, and ambition. A subtle vibration heralded another report. A fleet had been manipulated into engaging a friendly unit, resulting in catastrophic losses. The audacity of the manipulator had escalated from subtle interference to calculated provocation, a test of loyalty, command, and judgment. Each casualty was a message, each misstep an opportunity exploited by a mind patient and precise. Seraphine's fingers brushed the console, tracing projections across light years. "We are at a threshold," she murmured. "The manipulator will act again. When they do, we must respond decisively. Victory is not measured by fleet strength alone. It is measured in understanding, foresight, and the capacity to anticipate both action and consequence. The galaxy is indifferent, but failure will be unforgiving." Lyanna's projection inclined slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the escalating threat. "The manipulator may be someone we trust, or someone we once trusted," she said softly. "Their knowledge of our structures is profound, and their patience is deliberate. Every action leaves a trace, and we must follow it without falter." Seraphine's mind traced possibilities, outcomes, and contingencies. The convergence of strategy, loyalty, and deception was imminent. Somewhere among the stars, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, precise, and patient. Yet patience can falter, and even the most cunning leaves a trace. The void remained infinite and silent outside the aegis of silence. Yet aboard the vessel, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator's next move would not only reveal their objective, but their identity. The Sisters of Silence had prepared for confrontation. Every calculation, observation, and shadowed step, a measure of life, death, trust, and betrayal. Seraphine Kyle, centuries of vigilance guiding her hand, prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would collide. The hunt had evolved from observation to anticipation, from patience to engagement. Every decision now carried the potential to reshape the fate of sectors, fleets, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. In the quiet hum of the bridge, amid holographic projections and the endless expanse of stars beyond, inevitability pressed down, unseen but undeniable. The manipulator had revealed their hand through chaos, provocation, and the testing of loyalty. Now the convergence was imminent, and the consequences would echo across the galaxy. The galaxy shuddered beneath the silent weight of unseen forces. Beyond Orpheon, stars flickered and dimmed as if anticipating the coming collision of wills, of loyalties and betrayals, of strategy and destiny. Seraphine Kael stood upon the observation deck of the Aegis of Silence, her gaze fixed on the web of fleets and planetary systems that stretched like a tapestry across light years. The manipulator's hand had revealed itself in fragments, provocations, infiltrations, orchestrated chaos. But their identity remained cloaked, even as the consequences of their actions rippled through the Imperium. Lyanna's holographic projection appeared beside her, pale blue and trembling slightly under the weight of urgency. "Sister Kyle," she said, voice tight. "The manipulator has escalated. Entire fleets are in open conflict. Planetary defenses have struck allied units. Casualties are beyond calculation. This is no longer merely a test. It is a direct assault on command, trust, and the cohesion of the Order itself." Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath the mask. Every action the manipulator had taken had been deliberate, precise, a blend of psychological and tactical warfare, designed to unravel the Sisters of Silence from within. "Prepare contingency measures," she said softly, though the steel beneath her words betrayed her resolve. "We will respond, but only when we understand the full scope. Patience remains our greatest weapon, and precision our shield." Lyanna's eyes scanned the intricate movements of fleets across the starfield. "There are patterns," she whispered, "but they are convoluted, layered. The manipulator anticipates our responses, adapts as we deduce. Every engagement, every hesitation, every choice is observed. They are measuring our loyalties, testing the integrity of the Order, probing our weaknesses." Seraphine's mind raced. A mind capable of such manipulation was not only brilliant, but intimately familiar with the structures of the Sisters of Silence. Every deviation, every misalignment, every provocation bore the signature of patience, calculation, and audacity. To counter such a foe required foresight, insight, and unwavering discipline honed over centuries. A soft vibration heralded a secure transmission. The face of a planetary commander appeared, etched with fear and exhaustion. "Sister Kyle," he said, voice quivering. "Units are engaging one another without orders. Communication lines have been corrupted. Systems are on the brink of collapse. We are losing cohesion. Guidance is imperative." Seraphine's hands rested lightly upon the console. The manipulator had escalated beyond provocation. The chaos was now lethal, precise, and deeply personal. "Hold your positions," she commanded with authority. "Engage only if attacked. Document every anomaly. Preserve your forces. The Sisters of Silence will uncover the source. Patience and discernment will guide us to victory." Althara appeared behind her, silent as the void, yet commanding in presence. "Patience is our tool, but it is tested now," she said softly. "The closer we approach the manipulator, the greater the danger. They may strike at those we trust, and discernment becomes our only safeguard against betrayal. Seraphine's eyes swept the starfield, tracking fleet movements, planetary defenses, and the subtle irregularities that hinted at deliberate manipulation. Trust, long a fragile instrument, had been weaponized. Every observation, every inference, every decision carried consequences measured in lives and the survival of entire sectors. The manipulator sought to fracture cohesion, to erode confidence, to exploit hesitation, and to reveal hidden fractures within both fleets and the Sisters of Silence. Hours passed in careful observation and silent calculation. Fleets moved like ghostly spectres across light years, every deviation noted, every anomaly cross-referenced, every command scrutinized. The manipulator's hand was evident, subtle yet precise, pervasive yet cloaked. Patterns emerged, revealing both strategy and intent, a methodical unraveling of trust, authority, and cohesion, and the Sisters of Silence remained poised to confront it. Seraphine allowed herself a brief moment to gaze at the distant stars. Fires burned on worlds below, fleets hovered in tenuous orbit, and command structures trembled under invisible pressure. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, watched as the Sisters of Silence prepared to face a threat, equal parts intellect, audacity, and ambition. Another vibration drew her attention. A fleet had been manipulated into striking an allied unit, resulting in catastrophic losses. The audacity of the manipulator had escalated from subtle interference to direct provocation, a test of loyalty, command, and judgment. Every loss was a message, every deviation an opportunity for observation and exploitation. Seraphine's fingers traced the projections across light years. "We are at the threshold," she murmured. "The manipulator will act again. When they do, we must respond decisively. Victory is measured not by numbers alone, but by insight, foresight, and the capacity to anticipate action and consequence." The galaxy watches, indifferent yet unforgiving. Lyanna inclined her projections slightly, acknowledging the truth of her words. "The manipulator may be someone we trust, or once trusted," she said softly. "Their knowledge of our structures is profound. Their patience is deliberate. Every action leaves a trace. We must follow it without falter." Seraphine's mind traced every possibility, every contingency. The collision of strategy, loyalty, and deception was inevitable. Somewhere among the stars, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, precise, and patient. Yet patience can falter, and even the most cunning leaves a trace. The void remained infinite and silent outside the aegis of silence, but within, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator's next move would not only reveal their objective, but their identity. The Sisters of Silence had prepared for confrontation. Every calculation, every observation, every shadowed step was now a measure of life, death, trust, and betrayal. Seraphine Kyle, guided by centuries of vigilance and the weight of duty, prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would collide. The hunt had evolved from observation to engagement. Every decision, every shadowed maneuver, every choice now carried the power to reshape the fate of sectors, fleets, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. In the quiet hum of the bridge, amid holographic projections and the endless expanse of stars beyond, inevitability pressed down, unseen but undeniable. The manipulator had revealed themselves through chaos, provocation, and the testing of loyalty. Now the convergence approached, and the consequences would echo across the galaxy. The silence of space had taken on a weight, oppressive and almost sentient, pressing upon the decks of the Aegis of Silence. Seraphine Kale stood at the observation port, her eyes tracing the web of fleets that writhed like living constellations across light years. The manipulator had revealed their hand fully, their presence no longer hidden behind chaos and provocation. Every sector, every command line, every defensive perimeter was now a battlefield of mind and will, and the Sisters of Silence faced a truth both harrowing and unavoidable. Betrayal ran deeper than they had imagined. Lyanna's projection flickered, her voice taut with urgency. Sister Kyle, the manipulator has initiated direct confrontation. Fleets are engaging, planetary defenses are compromised, and the death toll rises by the hour. Entire systems are on the brink of collapse. This is no longer a game of observation. It is war, and the instrument of deceit is revealed. Seraphine's fingers hovered above the console, tracing the trajectory of fleets, anticipating the manipulator's moves, even as she absorbed the carnage. Prepare immediate response protocols, she instructed calmly, masking the tempest that stirred within her. Engage where necessary, but prioritize precision and restraint. Every choice must consider consequence, loyalty, and the potential for deception. The manipulator thrives on miscalculation. We will not give them that advantage. Lyanna's pale eyes glimmered with tension. The manipulator is familiar, she said softly, almost to herself. Their knowledge of our strategies, our protocols, even our personal tendencies. It is intimate, deliberate. This is someone who once walked among us, or perhaps still does. A subtle vibration heralded a secure transmission. The face of a planetary commander appeared, etched with fear and exhaustion. Sister Kyle, he said, voice trembling. Our fleets are engaging allied units. Communications are corrupted. Command is fractured. We cannot hold without direct guidance. Seraphine's jaw tightened. The manipulator had escalated from subtle influence to lethal orchestration. Hold your positions, she commanded. Engage only if attacked. Document every anomaly. Preserve your forces. The Sisters of Silence will identify the instigator and restore order. Althara's presence emerged behind her, silent and commanding. The closer we approach, the more dangerous the truth, she said quietly. Betrayal may lie among those we trust most. Every ally, every observation, every command could conceal duplicity. We must tread carefully, for the consequences are unforgiving. Seraphine's mind traced the threads of manipulation across sectors, plotting outcomes, contingencies, and potential revelations. Trust had been weaponized. Loyalty itself was a battlefield. The manipulator sought not merely to disrupt fleets, but to fracture belief, to erode cohesion, and to force choices that would leave scars upon the order. Every observation, every inference, every decision now carried weight measured in lives, in allegiance, and in the fragile stability of the Imperium. Hours passed in tense observation and calculated preparation. Fleets moved like ghostly phantoms across light years, each deviation noted, each anomaly cross-referenced, each command scrutinized. The manipulator's hand was undeniable, precise, pervasive, and devastatingly effective. Patterns emerged, revealing intent and strategy, a methodical unraveling of trust and authority, designed to test every limit. Seraphine allowed herself a brief moment to look at the distant stars. Fires burned across planets below. Fleets hovered in tenuous orbits, and command hierarchies strained under invisible pressure. The galaxy watched silently as the Sisters of Silence prepared to confront a threat equal parts intellect, audacity, and intimate understanding of their vulnerabilities. Another vibration drew her attention. a fleet had been maneuvered into engagement with a friendly unit, resulting in catastrophic losses. The audacity of the manipulator had evolved from subtle interference to direct provocation, testing loyalty, command, and judgment. Every casualty was a message, every deviation a probe into the integrity and resolve of the order. Seraphine's fingers traced the projections across light years. "The threshold is upon us," she murmured. "The manipulator will act decisively. When they do, we must respond with precision. Victory will not be measured solely by strength, but by insight, foresight, and understanding." The galaxy watches, indifferent yet unforgiving. Liana inclined her projection slightly, acknowledging the peril. "The manipulator may be someone we trust, or once trusted," she said softly. "Their knowledge of our structures, our responses, even our instincts, it is intimate, deliberate. Every step leaves a trace. We must follow it without error." Seraphine's mind mapped every contingency, every possible betrayal, every potential strategy. Somewhere in the infinite darkness, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, patient, precise. But even the patient can falter, and even the cleverest leaves a trace. The void outside the aegis of silence remained infinite and silent, yet aboard the vessel, a battle of intellect, perception, and loyalty raged. The manipulator's next move would reveal not only their objective, but their identity. The Sisters of Silence had prepared for confrontation. With every calculation, observation, and shadowed maneuver, now a measure of life, death, trust, and betrayal. Seraphine Kyle, centuries of vigilance guiding her hand, prepared to step into the shadows where loyalty, deception, and destiny would collide. The hunt had evolved from anticipation to confrontation, from observation to decisive action. Every decision now carried the power to reshape the fate of sectors, fleets, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. In the quiet hum of the bridge, amid holographic projections and the infinite expanse of stars beyond, inevitability pressed down, silent but undeniable. The manipulator had revealed themselves through chaos, provocation, and the testing of loyalty. Now the collision was imminent, and the consequences would echo across the galaxy, shaping the fate of the Imperium and the Sisters of Silence forever. The stars above Orpheon burned pale, distant fires witnessing the final reckoning that would shape the fate of countless worlds. The void seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the culmination of centuries-long vigilance, betrayal, and ambition. Seraphine Kyle stood at the observation deck of the Aegis of Silence, her armor reflecting the faint glow of distant suns, the weight of immortality pressing upon her as never before. Every choice she had made, every observation, every step in the shadowed hunt had led to this moment, the ultimate confrontation with the manipulator, the one who had nearly fractured the Imperium itself. Liana's projection shimmered beside her, pale and precise. "Sister Kale," she said, voice taut yet steady, "the manipulator's forces are consolidating. Entire sectors hang in the balance. Communications across allied fleets are corrupted. Command is fractured, and planetary defenses teeter on collapse. This is the final convergence. They intend to either dominate or destroy completely." Seraphine's gaze swept across the tactical projections, lines of light tracing fleet movements, planetary anomalies, and points of catastrophic engagement. The manipulator had orchestrated every detail with a terrifying combination of intellect, audacity, and intimate knowledge of the Sisters of Silence. The time for patience had passed. Precision, courage, and clarity of purpose would determine the outcome. "Prepare engagement protocols," she said softly. We strike with full awareness of consequence. Every decision carries weight measured in lives, in trust, and in the legacy of the Imperium. There is no margin for error. Althara emerged from the shadows, silent yet commanding. Patience guided us thus far, she said, her voice resonant, carrying centuries of wisdom. But now the path forward is clarity and action. Betrayal lies close to the heart. Every ally, every vessel, every strategy may conceal duplicity. We must act decisively, with eyes unclouded by loyalty alone. A vibration heralded a secure transmission. The face of a planetary commander appeared, etched with fear, exhaustion, and hope. "Sister Kale," he said, voice quivering, "we cannot hold. Our fleets are fractured, our defenses misaligned. The manipulator's presence is overwhelming. Guidance is imperative." Seraphine's hands hovered above the console, her mind calculating every possibility, every outcome, every contingency. The manipulator had revealed themselves, and the final confrontation was at hand. "Coordinate all loyal units," she commanded. "Engage only with precision, only where necessary. Preserve life where possible, but strike decisively where required. The manipulator must be confronted and neutralized." Lyanna's holographic form shimmered with tension. "The manipulator's identity. It is one we know," she said softly. "They were once among us, trusted, respected. Their knowledge of our procedures, our instincts, even our weaknesses. It is intimate. This is someone who shaped our past and now challenges our future. They are relentless, patient, and precise." Seraphine's jaw tightened beneath her mask. The weight of centuries, the burden of immortality, and the responsibility for countless lives pressed upon her. Trust had been weaponized. Loyalty had been tested. The manipulator had provoked, observed, and shattered illusions of control. But now their true face would be revealed, and the consequences of centuries of manipulation would unfold. Hours passed in tense anticipation. Fleets maneuvered with ghostly precision. Planetary defenses strained, and command hierarchies trembled under the weight of unseen influence. The manipulator's strategy had been deliberate, patient, and cruel, exploiting hesitation and eroding trust. Yet the Sisters of Silence had endured, observing, calculating, and preparing for the decisive confrontation that now loomed like a shadow across light years. Seraphine allowed herself a fleeting glance at the distant stars. Fires burned across planets below. Fleets hovered in tense orbits, and command structures quivered under invisible pressure. The galaxy observed silently as the final confrontation approached. A collision of intellect, loyalty, and destiny that would determine not only the fate of the Imperium, but the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. A subtle vibration indicated another transmission. The manipulator's true forces were revealed, concentrated, precise, and relentless. Entire sectors teetered on the brink of annihilation. The audacity of the manipulator had escalated from subtle provocation to direct confrontation, testing loyalty, command, and judgment to their limits. Every engagement, every maneuver, every decision would now decide the balance between survival and devastation. Seraphine's fingers brushed the console, tracing the intricate projections of fleets and planetary defenses. "The threshold is upon us," she murmured. "The manipulator will act decisively, and we must respond with clarity, courage, and precision. Victory will not be measured in fleet strength alone, but in foresight, judgment, and understanding. The galaxy is indifferent, yet unforgiving." Lyanna inclined her projection, acknowledging the inevitability. "The manipulator may be someone we trusted, or once trusted," she said softly. "Their knowledge of our structures, instincts, and decisions is profound. Every action leaves a trace. We must follow it without error. Seraphine's mind traced every contingency, every potential betrayal, every strategy. Somewhere within the infinite darkness, the manipulator moved unseen, confident, patient, precise. Yet even patience falters, and even the cleverest leaves a trace. The time for subtlety had passed. The void remained infinite outside the aegis of silence. Yet aboard the vessel, the collision of intellect, loyalty, and destiny unfolded. The manipulator's final move would reveal not only their objective, but their identity, and the sisters of silence were poised for confrontation. Every calculation, every observation, every decision now bore the weight of life, death, loyalty, and betrayal. Seraphine Kael, centuries of vigilance guiding her, stepped into the shadowed convergence where loyalty, deception, and destiny collided. The hunt had evolved from observation to engagement, from anticipation to confrontation. Every decision, every maneuver, every choice now held the power to reshape the fate of sectors, fleets, and the legacy of the Sisters of Silence themselves. In the quiet hum of the bridge, amid holographic projections and the endless expanse of stars beyond, inevitability pressed down, silent but undeniable. The manipulator had revealed themselves through chaos, provocation, and the testing of loyalty. Now the final collision had arrived, and the consequences would echo across the galaxy, marking the end of an era, the fall of betrayal, and the culmination of centuries of vigilance, sacrifice, and the burden of immortality.